Just giving you a second. All right, we'll take it in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the May 28th meeting, our regular and certification meeting of the Board of Elections of Cobb County. I will go ahead and call this meeting to order at 10:01 a.m. And to start, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance and we'll get going. All those that are willing and able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Has everyone on the board had an opportunity to review the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, and if there are no proposed revisions, I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda as provided.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Fisher. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the agenda as noted. All those in favor?
Aye.
All good. We're not going to count that twice. No, I appreciate it. I'll note that 4 in favor, and then Ms. Mosbacher is not present, so you'll just note that. It's not an abstention, but she's just not present. All right, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, that being public comment. We have, as previously shared, there are no individuals that have indicated they'd like to make public comment via our virtual means. Ms. Kathleen Hamill, you don't want to? Okay, no worries. Welcome.
I just want to say thank you for all of your work.
Okay, and we appreciate that comment. All right, well, we will then go to the next item on the agenda, that being the approval of our meeting minutes. We've got 2 sets of meeting minutes to approve. Our previous, or our April regular meeting, as was held on April the 8th, as well as our May 21st, 2024 election night meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes? And if yes, are there any proposed revisions, suggested changes?
Yes,
Yes, Mr. Bruning, your mic, sir.
A couple of comments
On which one, please?
on the first ones.
Okay, the April regular meeting. Mhm.
8th. On the second page, where there is under new business, and Director Fall presenting proposed schedule for the runoff for the advanced in-person. And that first bullet item where Director Tate stated we're allowed 5 plus our main office, talking about the drop boxes.
Yes.
The rule is 1 for every 500,000 residents, and I believe that was actually for every 100,000 registered voters, not residents, and not 500,000.
That is correct. Thank you for that catch. But yes, you're right.
And
1 drop box per 100,000 registered voters,
Right.
plus 1 at the main office. That's how we arrive at 6.
right, and then there's a typo over on the 5th page, about 2/3 of the way down. A motion to approve the office use of a single application submitted by the voters that are eligible to remain on the E&D rollover list, such that if in the word
They.
should be they, not the. And then the very last page, and this lists May 28th at 11 a.m. certification meeting, and we actually changed that later to this meeting, 10 a.m.
Right. I'm actually fine with that. remaining, because at the time that the meeting minutes were taken, at the time that the meeting minutes were taken, that's the announcement that was made.
Sure.
If anything, we can note, drop an asterisk or a footnote to note that upon my request, because I had a personal conflict, that we move the meeting time to 10 a.m.
Not critical.
I appreciate your diligence.
Sure.
Are there any other suggested revisions or comments to either our April regular meeting minutes, or for that matter, our May 21st minutes from our election night meeting? Okay. If there are none, I will accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes as amended per the comments provided by Mr. Bruning.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the meeting minutes as provided with the proposed revisions noted. All of those in favor? Okay. The vote is for, and then obviously noting Ms. Mossbacher's. Okay. All right. We will now move on to the next item on our agenda, the public hearing. Director Fall, will you be presenting that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So CP is going to get our map pulled up for us, and you guys have it in your packet as well. So this is to request the approval for a temporary change for the polling place location for precinct Kemp 01, KP 01, from Due West Methodist Church to Harrison High School, just for the runoff. The Due West Methodist Church is hosting multiple summer camps, and they're unable to accommodate us for the runoff. Harrison 01 is currently located at Harrison High School, so this will be a co-located precinct. You'll note that this precinct is outside, or the polling place is outside of the precinct boundary, as is the regular polling place as well. So again, this would be just for the June runoff, and we'll of course send precinct cards to all of those voters to let them know that their precinct has changed for the runoff.
Okay. When do we anticipate getting those cards printed and mailed, and what other methods are we using given the challenges USPS is experiencing?
We're currently in the transition of the regular county postal office doing our mailing work to ourselves. So we're kind of in this in-between where we have our permit, but we don't have funds loaded to the permit yet because we haven't set that up on the account, working with purchasing to try to work through that. I'm hoping to get them mailed by the end of the week, to get them dropped from our vendor by the end of the week. If not, hopefully early next week. It just depends on when we can get the permit loaded.
Okay. What other steps do we intend to take to put these voters on notice about the change of their polling location?
We'll put out a press release. We'll do social media through the county social media, and then we'll also have the required signs posted at the old precinct. So we have the three, I think they're 3 feet by 4 feet corrugated plastic signs by the different entrances, and then the one large banner sign that goes out for a full week before the election, letting voters know that that precinct has changed.
Okay. And then I know this is something that you all generally do, especially with the new POMS specialists, but perhaps working with the commissioners, especially the commissioner, and I personally do not know what commissioner this address, what district it falls in, but making certain that we get that notice into their newsletter.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Mr. Bruning, yes.
Tate, what runoff applies to this precinct?
That is a great question. Let me pull up my spreadsheet. I don't have it on the top of my
I think it's only the congressional
14, District 14,
runoff.
yeah. Thanks.
And looking at the map for that this morning, it looked like maybe we have a split precinct. Is that whole precinct in congressional 14th? Or
At
just
KP01?
part? Yeah.
Let me check. I might defer to our new registration division manager, Melissa Miller, who's here with us.
Hey, Melissa. The reason I ask is if it's split, then our notice ought to identify that.
Right, it would only go to the relevant voters. So if it is a split precinct, it wouldn't go to everyone because not everyone's eligible to vote. But I don't have in front of me the spreadsheet of our splits.
Right, right.
But I can get that to you guys.
Okay.
Thank you for raising the point,
So, yeah, thank
Mr.
you.
Bruning. Ms. Fisher?
Would this change, temporary change, be updated on my voter page?
Absolutely.
Okay. I really think this type of notice needs to be on our election landing page.
Okay.
So it's easy to see. It catches everyone's attention. And it's the easiest place to find it, right?
Right. That's true. And like, I know on election day, MVP and Jarvis had some challenges. So I think, Ms. Fall, I believe, based upon the fact that we've had these types of changes, I think you and your team are probably getting a sense of, you know, the standards, requirements, or things that we would like to see with regard to the multiple ways to get the message out to impacted voters.
Absolutely.
Mr. Bruni?
The other complication is because this is a primary runoff, I believe only voters who voted in the Democratic primary or didn't vote at all are eligible.
That is correct.
Can you put all that on that card?
So part of the issue with runoffs like this, where it's a singular party, is that that's going to be the root of the issue. Is for AIP, for election day, we're going to have just as many voters coming in who are not eligible as voters who are. We can certainly filter the postcards based on voter participation to send those only to those who either didn't vote, like you said, or voted in the Democratic primary. It can get a little tricky at that point when we have, you know, spouses in the same house who maybe vote differently, and then that causes sometimes more confusion. But we can look about putting a special note on the postcard, because the relocation postcards are pretty spacey, and we actually just blew them up to be 8.5 by 5.5 instead of 3.5 by 5.5. So I think that we can definitely put in a special note on there that notes that this is for the runoff only, and only these people are eligible.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, from time to time, Ross and his team will do videos for us. This might be the opportunity to do just a quick video, and I'm not the one to come up with the script, but just something interactive that says, you know, that communicates this information, especially if it's getting pushed out via social media. Someone might be more apt to click on a video on social media versus continuing to scroll through various posts that are on the Cobb County social media site. So if it's something that he and his team can handle for us, I don't think we've made one of those requests in a fair amount of time, so I'm hopeful he'll be able to assist us.
Yeah, I actually just spoke with him about doing a couple of these heading into November, so I don't think that'll be an issue. I can cover what the runoff is, what's on it, who's eligible, precinct change, and just wrap it up into a nice, like, 45-second video.
I think that'd be a good idea. Okay, Ms. Fisher?
That's a better idea than I had. Maybe I should have gone first, but I was just going to say doing somewhat of a flyer with bullet points would be helpful. Who can vote?
Maybe we do both?
Maybe we do both, yeah.
Okay, no, sounds good. Anyone else?
It
I'm so sorry.
is confusing, very.
Do we have the ability to do emails or text blasts?
So the county does have a newsletter platform that we could utilize. I'm not sure if we could, it would be included in the Cobb County newsletter, the regular one, but I do believe there's a subset newsletter for elections and registration that people can sign up for. And so that's one of the tasks of the new communications person, is to actually create a newsletter just for our department. But it'll definitely be included in the county-wide newsletter that Ross and his team send out.
Because I know when you register to vote, you have, well, it's an optional field for cell phone and email address, so I don't know if we have, like, those fields tied to the voter records.
So we've looked into, actually I've been approached by a few different vendors that unfortunately we just don't have the funds for, that we could do a text platform. There's a lot of new laws surrounding opt-in versus opt-out, and so a lot of times you have to physically mark that you opt in. When you provide your cell phone number, you opt into receiving messages versus just sending a text and giving an opt-out option. We, again, don't have the capacity to send out texts at this time. We don't have the platform to do that. And then the emails, I'd have to look into the law on the opt-in, opt-out in terms of email to add those people automatically to the newsletter. Typically, we only get emails if people are applying to vote absentee. We don't typically get them on their regular voter registration.
Perhaps that's something to look ahead to in November. I know that obviously we're in the middle of a budgeting cycle with the county, and I don't believe that this particular technology was provided for in the budget, but looking forward. And we've had these conversations before about texting and emailing, but obviously we need to meet our voters where they are, and if they're more apt to respond or receive information via email or text, we need to look into that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything else for this? Okay. Did you have anything further, Ms. Fall, with regard to this?
That's all.
Okay. So it looks like a vote is required here to approve this temporary polling location. We've had pretty good discussion. Some suggestions have been provided with regard to how we most ably provide notice to impacted voters. So that being the case, I will entertain a motion with regard to the temporary polling location change. Someone needs to make it.
I move that we approve the relocation of the polling place, temporary relocation of the polling place from Due West Methodist Church to Harrison High School.
You probably have to start all over. You were on me, or your mic wasn't on.
Sorry. I move that we approve a temporary relocation of, what's the name of this?
KPO1?
KPO1 from Due West Methodist Church, which is not available, to Harrison High School, which is available and is one of our current poll locations for the June 18th runoff only.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to move polling location KPO1 from Due West Methodist Church to Harrison High School for our June 18th general primary runoff only. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. Going on to new business, our director's report.
All right, so while my slides are pulling up, we are going to look at the election summary. So in your packets, I provided you both the election summary report and the statement of votes cast by precinct. You'll note that the full statement of votes cast is almost 4,300 pages, so I've just included the by precinct summary, and then I will send y'all a link once we have final and complete. It's too big to email, so I'll send you a SharePoint link. That way you have access to those files. All right, so for this part, we're going to talk about pre-election day, AIP and ABM, advanced in-person and absentee by mail. We'll talk about election day and the different precinct issues we saw. We'll talk a little bit about post-election day, the official and complete results, and then the risk limiting audit, and then we'll pause there for the certification vote, and then we'll run into the rest of my report once we're done with that. So, of course, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to jump in, because each slide covers something different. So we'll just go a little bit slide by slide. So we'll jump into pre-election day. So we had 12 total sites, if you include Maine and Maine E&D as two separate sites for this election. And I apologize to South. They got left off of this chart inadvertently. It was, I think, a little bit too big, but they are on the next chart. So we had 29,027 voters across all of our sites. You'll see that at East Cobb Government Center was our largest site with just over 4,000 voters, followed by our Smyrna site with 3,790 voters. This kind of gives you a good spread of the sites. The South site, for your reference, did 2,458 voters, so they'd be a little smaller than that west, that light green bar, which isn't showing the numbers for some reason. I apologize. That should be 2,868. And so you can kind of see where our larger sites were, where some of our smaller sites were, and that we still did a lot at E&D, even though that was at the same location as our main site. So we did see a lot of voters there for this election. Any questions about that? This next chart compares the PPP with the primary, so you'll see we were pretty similar across all of our sites. So South is shown in this chart, so you can see all 12 locations. So I will say South is the only one that really had a notable difference, South, Smyrna. The rest are pretty on par with each other. The March PPP is that orange line, and the May primary is the green line. And so you can see kind of the differences that we had. Even though the PPP was a much smaller ballot, a lot less going on, we saw a pretty similar turnout. We had almost the exact same percentage overall turnout that we did in March. And so that was pretty impressive. For a sampling of days, this is our May election, the one that we just had. So you can see that we have our first day, which was 887. We started off really slow. Normally that first day is pretty busy for us, but we didn't see that with this election. I think it was just the general environment in the community. It was pretty quiet. You didn't see a lot of signs out yet that early. Then I have the first Saturday, we did 524. All of our sites were open on the Saturdays. I have our first Sunday. Again, we only did 5 sites for Sundays. So on the first Sunday, 5-5, we did 188 voters across those 5 sites. Our second Saturday, 5-11, we did 718 voters. Our second Sunday, which was Mother's Day, we did 191 voters. And then I did the last 3 days because that's where you can really see that ramp up. Those were our busiest days kind of leading up. And you can see our last day, we did double the day before. So it was quite busy. We did have a wait time at Smyrna, which I'll talk about in just a second. Any questions about that?
Just quickly, in response to the last day, I mean, obviously, we all know that the last day is publicized, just by virtue of publicizing the schedule. But did the office undertake any type of communication around this is the last day or we're in the last week or anything that might account for this other than individuals saying, hey, it's the last day, let me go today?
Yeah, the Cobb County social media definitely did post this a lot more. I think they posted almost every day, if I remember right, leading into that last week. And we saw a big push the last day reminding voters that it was the last day. I know that several commissioners had put it in their newsletter for the final week, letting voters know that it was the last week for AIP as well. So I know I had received a few of their newsletters that we were mentioned in one of their blurbs.
Okay, great, thank you.
So like I mentioned, we only saw a wait time the final day at Smyrna Community Center. They closed, voting ended at 7 p.m. Their last voter voted at 7:41 p.m., so it was about a 40 to 45 minute wait throughout the afternoon. The delays we saw were a combination of the length of the ballot and how long voters were standing at the ICXs just voting. And then we also saw a pretty good wait at the scanners. And so I wanted to show this chart to kind of walk through why that happened. So because of the length of the ballot, combined with how many different ballot styles we had almost 2,500 different ballot styles for this election, which is extreme. That's a lot for any metro county, that's a lot. So we had to split our scanners. So scanner 1 at the AIP sites were precincts A through L, and scanner 2 was precincts M through Z. So the reason that CES, or the Secretary of State's Election Systems Division, had to split them is because the first time that ballot is scanned, so the first time a Murdoch 01 ballot is scanned in that second scanner, it has to run through the whole list of every single possible ballot style before it associates to that one and recognizes it as that ballot, and then it'll cast. So after the next Murdoch 01 voter, they only need to wait 20 to 30 seconds, but I may need to wait, if I was the first Murdoch 01 voter, 45 seconds to a minute. So we saw a wait that first day, but then even towards the end, we saw the ballots were taking 20 to 30 seconds to scan even on that final day. So you can see why we had lines at somewhere like Smyrna, where the vast majority of voters were likely Smyrna voters, and so, or even Mableton voters, so you can see they would be in that second scanner. You can see at Smyrna alone, the A through L scanner only did 304 ballots, whereas the second scanner did 3,486 ballots. And you can find similar instances, if you look at Mableton, 122 versus 2,336. Even our office, we see a lot of Marietta voters, 791 versus over 1,900. Same at Tim Lee. That was the only one that was pretty similar. And then our very last one at Collar Park, Austell, those were pretty similar. And so if we have to split the scanners again for November, which we haven't been told if we will or not, what our plan is at these locations, now that we have these numbers, at Smyrna, for example, we'll do a second M through Z scanner. So they'll have one A through L and then 2 M through Zs. That way to help accommodate that wait time. The ballot won't be as long, so the scanning won't take as long in order for it to capture that image and associate that ballot. But that's our plan moving forward. At Kennesaw, you can see our Northwest location. We did 1,000 more ballots in scanner 1. We would do 2 scanner 1s and then 1 scanner 2. So that's just what I wanted to touch on, because this was my first experience doing the split scanners. I know the staff had done it before, but I wanted to make sure we captured these numbers. That way we didn't have the same issue with the wait times again.
Okay. A couple of quick questions. You said it was taking 30 to 45 seconds, maybe even upward of 45 seconds to scan a ballot. Just for the sake of kind of providing a comparator, in the absence of the length of the ballot that we had this election, a shorter ballot, or generally how long would a ballot take to scan?
In the PPP, the ballots scan within 10 to 15 seconds.
Okay.
So that was one race, one ballot style per party. Whereas November, it'll be a little bit less. I think we'll still see a longer scan. Our equipment is only getting slower. It's not getting faster. So the more scans it has on it, the slower it's going to be. And our AIP scanners, they take a lot of scans. So we noticed this during LNA when we had to scan ballots after election, the rescans, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I was timing on those scans, a precinct scanner where there's only 5 ballot styles on that scanner. Every single ballot was taking 20 seconds.
Okay. And then you said we do not know as of yet whether we need to split scanners. When do we find out, and just for the sake of clarity, who advises us that we need to split scanners?
So that advice comes from CES, the Secretary of State's Election Systems Division, which is here in Marietta. And so we haven't talked about November yet. We are in our first review of our June ballots, our runoff ballots. So I believe once we have those signed off on, we can start talking about November, because we'll know the length of the ballot at that point, because we have all the races. Just barring if we have any independents or certified write-ins, that'll change the number of candidates, but we know the number of offices to be filled.
Right, but just for the point of clarification, our office does not determine
No.
whether we split scanners or not.
Correct. No,
Okay,
we
and then finally, and I believe, from my perspective, the suggestion with regard to doubling up for particular precincts on the M through Z and A through L, based upon the numbers here, great solution. I presume we are good with regard to having equipment to accommodate that, and we either have already or we will do whatever testing, because if it's equipment that's not necessarily used on a consistent basis, like we weren't using it for this election.
Right. So we do have backups.
Backups.
I will say we don't have a lot. So it is likely that these scanners will need to be flipped for backups for election day. But we do have enough to utilize a 2-scanner system for whatever side of the alphabet they need. And they will be LNA'd properly, just like the others. We'll likely be using the bucket scanners. We have extra bucket scanners versus extra duplexes. That does depend on how many AIP sites you want to have for November.
Sure.
If we were to do 16, I'm not sure we could accommodate 3 scanners at every precinct. It'd be tight. But we just would have to, again, flip them. So it just kind of depends on how many AIP sites that we have for November.
Okay, makes sense. I guess just we all will make a note to raise that when we're having that AIP location discussion.
Absolutely. And I'll
ahead of
have the hard
November.
numbers for you then.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Is this anything we look at during the LNA testing? Do we look at scan times?
We are scanning them, so we're observing the scan times, yes. We don't necessarily document them, but since we're hand scanning all of the ballots, we are experiencing the scan times.
Okay, maybe we should document it so we have an idea in November.
I can check in
Maybe.
with Michael. He's not here this morning. They're out doing pickups. But I can get with him to make sure that we don't already record that time and see if we can add that to the LNA sheet.
Well, that might lead us to make a better decision, or CES a better decision on the number of scanners, maybe.
Yeah, it is limited to how many we have, of course, but
Right.
if it was up to us, we'd have, 10
Yeah.
at each site. But that's unfortunately, they're a little pricey, so we do what we can.
Okay, thank you.
I have to admit that when I first heard about this split scanners, mentally I was thinking they were alphabetical by voter name, not alphabetical by precinct. And seeing this is very ineffective to splitting the load versus if it were alphabetical by voter, you'd have more likelihood of more equal split. So I guess I would just suggest that we provide this information to the CES and suggest we could get a more equal utilization of the scanners, alphabetical by voter as opposed to by precinct. But I don't know if that's technically possible or
No,
not.
so we're not able to do it by voter because your ballot is not associated to your name.
Of
And
course.
so that's why you wouldn't be able to do that. The only thing it's associated to is your precinct and your ballot combo. We went back and forth on the M, whether to include it in the latter half or the first half, because we have both Marietta and Mableton, so we have a lot of M precincts.
Right.
I think the split ended up being 36-24, something around there. But if we could split M in half between Marietta and Mableton, I think it would help, but it'd be way too confusing for the voters. And so we just try to do a hard stop on the letter there. So, but we can look at, to see if we bumped M up to the earlier half of the alphabet, if that would have helped.
Thanks.
Sure.
Would looking at the voter history in those precincts for AIP help us? It would say that these people show up, and they show up normally at, whether it be North Cobb Senior or South Cobb Senior.
I'm not sure if there is a Jarvis report that indicates voter history over time by location. I'd have to look into Jarvis. I don't think that that's something we have actively available. We can look at the most recent election and look at those precincts that voted in that AIP site, but I'm not sure we could historically look, this voter always votes here. Typically, overall in election administration, once a voter votes a different way than election day, they tend to stick to it. So it's safe to assume that the people who are voting AIP will continue to vote AIP. Whether or not they vote at the same site, that depends, because it's more of a convenience with AIP. So maybe they vote closer to their house this year, but then they're out at Costco next year, so they're gonna vote over by Costco. So there's not necessarily the same indication to show that they're always gonna vote at their same neighborhood location. But I can look into Jarvis and see what type of report, if there is one, that we might could pull that would give us some sense of that data.
Okay.
Did anyone else have any questions for this first portion of Tate's report? Okay.
Okay. And then this is, the last part I have is just comparing the days between AIP for the PPP and the May primary. Again, the PPP is that orange line and the green line is May. So you can see we started off pretty on par. We did about half the voters the first day than we did for the PPP, and then it became more similar. I did leave off the first Sunday because we only did one Sunday in March. But then you can see those last 3 days, the true difference in the number of voters that we did, which I thought was a pretty cool visual, so I wanted to provide that.
Thank you.
For ABM, we had 3,415 total voters. By ABM, we issued 4,728. We received 3,419, and we ended up counting 3,415 of those. There were 53 rejected. What's not reflected in this chart is the provisionals that were accepted. So that's what gets us to 3,415. We send out provisional absentee ballots for those who have a cure on their application. So certain things we can not reject an application and instead still issue that provisional ABM ballot. And then once they cure that application, we can count that. So that's what gets us to 3,415. So we had, across all sites and days, we had 29,027 AIP voters and then 3,415 ABM. And I'll get into the percentages in a second. Okay.
High level, just
Yes.
the reasons for rejections. Were we seeing any kind of trends as to the reasons why we were rejecting?
Not that I'm aware of. It's the typical stuff. They forget a signature or they don't complete their oath envelope. I'm only aware of one that 2 individuals' ballots were placed into one secrecy envelope. So it was likely a husband and wife that did that. Because of that, we couldn't count either because we didn't know which one was the voter who completed the oath envelope.
Right.
That's a little bit less common, but we always see inter-house mix-ups like that. So just the typical missing oath envelope information.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to Election Day. So as we talked about in our election night meeting, overall it was a very quiet day. We had a really smooth election day for the most part. The most common issue that we saw was a scanner jam due to the diverter. So when there is a write-in on a ballot, those ballots are diverted into a separate tray because if there's a certified write-in, we have to count those ballots towards that certified write-in to see if how many votes that certified individual got. One of the reasons we saw this happen, especially more towards the end of the day, is that they noticed that the ballots were curling from the heat of the printers, and that was causing it to get caught up in the tray. We saw these really in our duplexes, whereas the bucket diverters were further away from the scanner, so we didn't see it in the buckets as much as we did the duplexes. It was a really easy fix because the poll manager can open it and take the ballots out of the diverting tray. Since we didn't have any certified write-ins, they didn't need to be kept separate. But we got at least 20 calls throughout the day about this, so it was pretty common. And then because the ballots with write-ins were diverted into a separate tray, 4 precincts rescanned those diverted ballots thinking that they weren't scanned the first time. Instead of calling us and asking us why, they decided to take that upon themselves. So these batches were rescanned to ensure accurate totals. So you can see on the right-hand column the 4 precincts that did that. We rescanned them to make sure that they had the correct totals. So the reason that this was discovered is the day after the election, one of the elections team, Kara's team's first task, is that they use paper counters to count the ballots for the precinct. So they take each precinct and they put it into a paper counter to count how many ballots are in there. Then they look at the tapes from election night and they say, all right, this should say 334 ballots. That's how many were scanned on the tape. Do we have 334 ballots? Well, for these 4 precincts, we didn't, right? We had less ballots than what was on the tapes because these precincts rescanned them. So Baker 01, just their second scanner, scanner B, they had scanned an extra ballot that had been diverted. Kennesaw 2A scanned 3 ballots extra, or scanned them twice. Mableton 5B, above and beyond, scanned 16 extra ballots. And then Mabry 01 scanned 3 extra ballots. When I contacted the Secretary of State's office to ensure that we were following proper protocol on how to correct this issue, they let us know that this happened in a lot of counties, and that because we didn't have write-ins in March, that it was just a new thing that maybe wasn't mentioned in training. We have reached out to these poll managers and let them know that this was a big boo-boo to never do it again, and we will be sure to include this in the last-minute instructions for June. I'm also hoping that since we haven't approved our ballots for June yet for the runoff, that we can have CES program our project where the ballots aren't diverted if they have a write-in because we don't have a certified write-in candidate. So they're the ones that program that diversion. So hopefully we won't have this issue at all if they can avoid programming that piece of the project. So like I said, overall it was very smooth. We had an improved supply drop-off procedures. We got a lot of positive feedback on that on election night. seemed to go a lot smoother and a lot quicker, less wait times. I believe our average wait time from red bag drop-off across the street to GEMS upload was 20 minutes, which was much improved from March, so.
So I have a question on the images from the double scans on the scanners. What do we do with that?
So all of those original memory cards from these 4 scanners were deleted out of RTR. We still have the original memory cards, of course. And then we used fresh memory cards to rescan the ballots. So what is now in CITL, or our election night reporting, what is in RTR, our EMS, all of it are the correct images, the correct files, the correct totals. So it's all been corrected, which you'll see is reflected on the election summary report.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions?
Great. Okay, so post-election day, these are our official and complete results now that we have provisional in. So you can see we hit just over 10% turnout on election day. We had 5.72% turnout in AIP, just 0.68% ABM turnout, and then our provisionals, we had 124 provisionals. We had 127 from election day. These are the ones that were total. We had 129 total provisional ballots. 127 election day, 2 from AIP. 115 provisional ballots were counted. 99 were the wrong precinct after 5 p.m. 16 were other reasons, lack of ID, that ended up being counted. Bless you. And then the additional, we had 115 provisional, and the additional 9 that you see in that total of 124 were our UOCAVAs. So UOCAVA ballots can come in after 7 p.m. on election day. They just have to be received by 5 p.m. on provisional Friday. So we had 9 of those. And then one thing while we're looking at this chart that I wanted to note is why there's more ballots than voters. So this was a 2-card election. So most voters got a 2-card ballot. So this was more obvious for voters who voted ABM because they had 2 separate physical pieces of paper in their absentee by mail ballot, big 19-inch ballots. It was less obvious on election day or AIP voters because it was one singular page. However, it's the same project. So it's still 2 separate cards. It's all the same internally. So because of this, most voters were 2-card ballot. If you voted nonpartisan, Republican, or Democrat, it was a 2-card ballot. However, you'll note that some of these numbers are not the number of ballots divided by 2 equals the number of voters. That's for a few reasons. So first, we have federal-only voters. Federal-only voters are not very common. Federal-only are people who have permanently moved overseas. So our retirees who have moved to the Bahamas or to Mexico, under law, they still have the right to vote absentee at their last location in the United States, but they can only vote federal elections. So for this election, it would have just been their congressional representative. So because of that, it was a 1-card ballot. It was one single race. In November, it'll still be 1 card. It'll be their congressional representative and the president. And so that's why it's not necessarily an even split. One of our UOCAVAs was a Fed only, so that's why that number is not even. And then we also, in ABM, we had 6 voters who were initially mailed 3 single-page ballots, which did count as 3 cards, which was a printer error. And I've advised ABM in the future that they should reprint those ballots to be correct instead of mailing out the 3 single pages. We hope to not have a 2-card ballot in November, but I'm sure we will. So that's that. Final turnout was 16.44%.
Can you explain for those watching and the very few number in the audience, and for me again, the definition of a card? Because I was under the understanding the Democrat ballot was 3 pages. The Republican was 2. I didn't check the nonpartisan. So can you just give us the
Sure.
definition?
So 1 card is 1 whole piece of paper. So if this was my ballot, you'll see this is 1 piece double-sided. This would be 1 card. And then if this is my other piece of my ballot, it's one page single-sided, but this is still one card, even though it's single-sided. So we print either front, back, or front only. So this together would be a 2-card ballot. And this is exactly the kind of ballot that we saw this election, unless you had the Kennesaw special election. And if you were Democrat or Republican in that, the Kennesaw would have been on the back side of your second card. But the Republican, Democrat, and nonpartisan both had a double-sided front 1 card and then a single-sided second card, again, unless they had that Kennesaw special city race, then that was on the back of that second card. So they're both 2 cards. It's just one whole page. It's not page 1, 2, 3 is 3 cards. It's the whole page. So that's what makes a card. So a 2-card ballot is what we had. The full ballot was 19 inches, so 2 cards, 19 inches.
So the nonpartisan was also front and back?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for this portion? Okay.
And then the last thing before we can turn over to the certification vote is just I wanted to highlight the RLA. I emailed the parties this morning. That says math. It should be Thursday, May 30th. I combined May and 30th. It's going to be 9 to 5. If we have the same number of batches and the same size batches that we had in March, then it will hopefully be done between noon and 1. It just depends. The batches are being drawn tomorrow in the afternoon is what the Secretary of State let us know. We'll have 5 teams and we'll be in the advanced voting room at our main office.
All right, anything further? Questions, excuse me, for Tate? All right. Do we have the official results to? Okay, perfect.
Madam Chair, I should have brought this up earlier.
Yes.
You asked at the beginning of the meeting, should there be any agenda changes, and I didn't notice this. If you remember last week, we got a petition for recount,
Yes,
and they asked, it's a request under the discretionary section, and they asked to consider it before the certifications. So probably there ought to be an item in here before certification to deny that discretionary. If that's what the board, you can discuss it, but we
Sure.
might want to amend it and add it and just act on it before the certification, just so that we can follow the proper order on that. And that was something I should have caught this morning. I thought it was on the, I scanned the agenda and thought I saw it, but I guess I was reading too fast. But yeah, that there was something that was received last week from Mr. Kettering, Paul Kettering.
Paul Kettering, correct, okay. Well, that being the case, I will accept a motion to amend the agenda to add consideration of the petition for a recount as received from a Mr. Paul Kettering.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and properly seconded to amend the agenda to add the petition for a recount. All those in favor of amending the agenda to add this agenda item? The motion passes unanimously. Okay. The motion passes unanimously, so the agenda is now amended to add this item, and thank you, Mr. White. Do you want to just review that, as well as any legal bases that we need to consider in providing our decision as to whether to approve the recount or deny it?
Yes, and just briefly, it's a petition. It looked like it was submitted on almost like a pre-printed form petition. I'm not sure I've ever seen one like that, but it was a petition to request a recount, and if you'll recall, in the recount section, there are certain provisions in OCGA 21-2495 that say a candidate can request a recount if even though on the face of it, there doesn't appear to be a discrepancy, they have allegations of fraud or other irregularities that have occurred. That section A that he cited to for his request actually says that the superintendent may order a recount. So it's discretionary, and it's based on whether you find good cause in the petition as to whether to move forward with it. There's other sections later that deal with when it's within its 1% or whatever, you can request an automatic, and then even further down, there's some provisions that say, if, like in this case, actually, he could have requested directly to the Secretary of State because it's a multi-county race. But his request in the code section talk about if you're going to do the recount or do the recanvass, then you would need to act on it before certification, and so it's just usually appropriate to either accept or deny that before. So having received that, I believe it was Friday, there wasn't, time to call any kind of a special meeting to consider it, and so it was my opinion the board could just act on it at this meeting before certification, and it would be up to you as to whether you saw anything. In terms of the contents of the complaint, just from a legal standpoint, I don't see grounds for a recount. I mean, it really sounds like he had more complaints about the reporting and not understanding why certain precincts were showing up at a certain time, and I think he sent screenshots from like 11 Alive or something instead of from the actual Secretary of State's website, or even from our reporting website. But you were all present election night, and ours were reporting well before midnight, and he had some complaints about how things were showing up later, and I don't know if that had to do with Cherokee or the Secretary of State and how their stuff loaded, but I didn't see any allegations in there about it was one of these where you see where said, well, it looked weird on the reporting, so there must have been something irregular in the counting, but I think Ms. Fall sent all the precinct counts and all the things that would have showed there was no irregularities that we could see on our end. So.
Okay. And just for the sake of clarity, and for the benefit of those that might be watching, Ms. Fall, if you'll just share the race that Mr. Kettering was in, or if you have that. I apologize, I should have shared that to you.
It was House District
22. Okay.
State House District 22.
All right.
Kettering, and then candidate 2 was Jordan Ridley.
Yeah, so House District 22, and this is one that we share with Cherokee, as Mr. White mentioned. And so we had nine precincts that contain this district, and in Mr. Kettering's petition, he did note that the results were showing 9 out of 15 precincts. Those 9 were our 9 precincts. As y'all know, we were 100% reported, I believe, at 11:32 p.m. And so I believe that the reporting mechanism was an issue with Cherokee, and it wasn't anything to do outside of they were having issues with our E&R system, CITL. And so I think we were fully reported on our end.
Right, that was going to be my next question, when we were fully reported at 11:32. That time is 11:32 p.m.
I believe so.
Okay.
Let me-
I also note, while you're looking to confirm that, we adjourned our meeting at 11:39.
So I think it was just right before that then, because as soon as we were fully reported, I came back to the room for us to adjourn. So
Okay.
between 11:30 and 11:35.
Okay.
Are you sure Cobb has 9 precincts in 22, that those numbers aren't flipped? I think we only have 4.
I believe
Or
when
5.
I checked,
We have
the
9?
results on our end, it showed 9 out of 9, 100% reported for
Okay.
him for this race.
Cherokee has fewer
Fifth.
precincts, but more votes.
Oh, okay, all right, so. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? And I note that when we did receive the petition, it obviously was shared with everyone on the board on last Friday. Our attorney, Daniel White, provided feedback and insight, referenced the specific code provisions that related to the decision that we needed to make, or that we will need to make. But if anyone has any additional questions for either Mr. White or Ms. Fall.
I do. Do we know whether he also requested this of Cherokee?
He did. I spoke with the elections director around 6 o'clock on Friday, and she let me know that she had received it as well, and she asked when the board would be taking it up, and I let her know it would be at our Tuesday certification meeting.
So are they planning on doing the recount?
She said that at that time, she did not believe her board would move forward with a recount due to the margin of the race.
So,
I think that's
Mr.
worth
White.
noting, the margin. I don't know that we have so far, but the margin was 2,000. Mr. Ridley received 2,200 277 votes, I believe, was the final, and to 1,139. So it was like a 66 to 33 margin. So it's not anywhere close to the automatic. And
Yeah, where I was going with that question is, should Cherokee decide to do a recount? Because they do pick certain races typically and do a hand count. Would that affect the outcome of what we do?
I do not believe so, but we obviously have our counsel here, and to the extent that you're referencing that they, quote, select races to do recounts, it doesn't necessarily seem that that selection is generally informed by what we have here, which is a petition for a recount. I'm not in the head, or for that matter, on the board of, over there at Cherokee, or, so I don't believe, but, Mr. White?
no, and this petition was specifically, his petition referenced 6 precincts here that he wanted. I think he requested Wade Green 02, Baker 01, Pinter 01, Big Shanty 02, Bells Ferry 04, and Palmer 01. Those were his specific requests to recount those specific precincts. I don't know why of the the number that are here, but that was his request. And so that's the way the statute's written, is you say, I would like a recount in these particular precincts, and that's all he requested. So that's all you can consider is what he's asked for. And then whatever action Cherokee takes doesn't affect you. And that's why there's also that provision that allows the Secretary of State for multi-county to do that. And I also think I gave you all a wrong total there, but yes, it was still 66-33 in that rough range, but I think I gave you an earlier reported total. But regardless, it was nowhere within the the automatic recount comes in when you're talking about less than 1%, and we're not even in that general realm, and so it just from a purely legal standpoint, whether the petition showed good cause, that my reading of it was that there wasn't really a good legal cause for it, but that y'all are really the one that look at the factual issue and have to consider, do you think there were any irregularities that would require you to, that weren't showing up on the count that would require you to do a discretionary recount?
Okay. But you do raise a good point, given the fact that the race is determined not just by Cobb voters, by Cherokee, so I appreciate you raising the point.
Thank you.
Ms. Everett?
If his concern was about reporting, and we feel confident that we reported everything before midnight, and his evidence was 11 live screenshots, it just doesn't seem like we have enough concern to move forward with a recount.
Tate did send the timestamps. I didn't see anything irregular
Right.
in our timestamps on
Okay.
those precincts, so thank you for that.
Well, that being the case, I'll entertain a motion with respect to the petition as filed by Mr. Kettering to request a recount for specific precincts in the House District 22 race.
I move that we deny the request for a recount.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to deny the request for a recount as provided by or submitted by Mr. Paul Kettering in the House District 22 race. All of those in favor of denying the petition? The motion passes unanimously, so the petition is denied. That then gives us now the opportunity to vote to certify the results. CP, will you place the results back up on the screen, please, sir? Okay. So our director, Tate Fall, has provided us with her report, and now we have before us the official and complete results of the May 21st general primary nonpartisan election as held again on May 21st. Is there a motion with respect to certification?
I move that we certify the official and complete results.
Is there a
for May
second?
21st.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to certify the official and complete results as displayed here, as well as encompassed in our noted in the election summary report that each of us have. All of those in favor of certifying these results? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda?
So the next item is the June AIP proposal. So before you, you have the flyer, which we can go ahead and pull up the document on the screen as well for the voter, or for the people in the audience. So we are proposing 3 locations. And in talking with the team, and I know I had mentioned this in email to the board as well, I know that the board is is wanting to really be consistent with our voters. That way they know kind of what to expect. And with runoffs, that's difficult. And so we have decided as a staff that we would propose a formula to use moving forward for runoff elections. So in runoff elections, what our hope is that in a runoff like this, where it's not countywide, we have to be open at our main site, so we'll be open there always. But we propose satellite locations in each of the districts in which is on the ballot. So you can see that we have our main office, which will have a drop box as always. Our Kennesaw location at Ben Robertson Community Center, that would be the most central location for us to have in the U.S. House of Representatives District 14 race. And then the other race is the County Commission District 2 runoff. These are both Democrat-only runoffs. That would be our East Cobb Government Center location. As noted in the bar chart earlier, that is our highest performing location in the May election, followed closely by Smyrna, but we decided to go with East Cobb Government Center as the Smyrna location is approximately located to our office, that we felt confident that those voters would come vote at our location and not be deterred by having to go up to East Cobb Government Center. So with that in mind, if it was a countywide election, our formula would be 1 satellite location in each commission district. So that would be our main office and then 4 satellite locations, 5 total. If it was a large runoff, we would definitely be open to doing maybe 2 per commission district, but based on the turnout we saw in AIP coupled with the cost to run a satellite site, this is the formula that the staff feels confident in. So we're proposing these 3 locations from June 10th to June 14th, Monday through Friday, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Fall with regard to the proposal, or for that matter, the formula that she and the team have come up with?
Just want to say I love having formulas because then we know we're consistent from one election to the next, so.
That's my hope.
And it makes sense to spread them out geographically, so I agree with that proposal.
Thank you.
Aren't we required to have at least one Saturday?
I don't believe for runoffs we are not, no.
Okay.
It's only for
Not for
regular scheduled
runoff.
elections.
Okay.
Pretty sure of it.
Yes.
I had that conversation with someone else, with another director or board chair, and we're not
Okay.
required to in a runoff.
Not that. Just for the record, it's not because, I didn't ask that question because I support the weekend voting, but just wanted to follow the law.
We appreciate your clarification, Debbie.
You're welcome. I didn't want to be a hypocrite.
No worries. Anyone else have questions or comments or concerns to raise about the proposed AIP schedule for our runoff? Yeah, I'll be honest, when I initially saw this, my knee-jerk reaction was there's nothing in Smyrna. Obviously, that's a primary area, squarely in District 2. But I know I drive right by that location to get to our office or sometimes here. And to me, it's a reasonable, amount of time or number of miles. So hopefully it won't be a deterrent. I don't know
Do
if
we
anyone else
have
has-
the number of registered Democrat voters in both areas?
We don't register by party in Georgia, so we don't have
Well,
numbers by that.
previous votes, let's put it that way.
I'm not sure if we have a report that we can pull by party in that way.
Well, we know who pulled the Democrat ballot to begin with, right?
For this past election,
Yeah.
yes, we have our total numbers of how many Democrat voters voted in this election.
So we could look at East Cobb, Government Center, Timley, and Smyrna, and get an idea, maybe?
I don't believe Tim Lee is in, let me double check.
The reason I ask that is because I believe there's a whole lot more Democrat voters in Smyrna than there is in East Cobb. I mean, a whole lot more.
I know that we have those results on our website, so just give me 1 second. I'll get them
Okay.
pulled
I
up.
think the counter to that, even if that's true, is that we're trying to spread them out geographically. So if we have locations in Smyrna and the main office, the East Cobb people are gonna have to drive across the county, whereas if you do a location in East Cobb, the Smyrna people really don't have that much more farther to go to the main office.
That's probably true, but from East Cobb to the main, it's 15 minutes. From parts of Smyrna, it's about 15 minutes. And maybe we need to consider adding Smyrna then, instead of in lieu of, but I think it's important to know who voted, that can vote in the runoff.
I don't have the totals by party by site in front of me. I just have the totals across all the days. However, in discussing this with the team, we strongly would caution having more than one site per district. This will be an extremely low turnout election, and that's not to discourage anyone from wanting to vote, but I think it's a matter of convenience versus actual ability to vote. And this is what the team suggested in terms of the size of the location, the volume that we see in that location. I can pull those numbers and get them by site for y'all, but then that would obviously delay our vote today. I just don't have those numbers in front of me, and I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. I just thought maybe we had looked at that.
All right. Okay, well, as someone that lives in District 2, would be impacted by this, and that's why I feel comfortable making the statement that I'm going to make, I think it's reasonable, what has been provided here. So not necessarily someone that's not implicated. Yes, it would be more convenient for me to just drive the 0.8 miles or however from my home to the Smyrna Community Center, but I know I would not personally be deterred to have to either go to the main office or, for that matter, to the East Cobb Government Center. So, and I'm hopeful that the balance of my fellow Smyrna residents who are eligible will feel the same. Does anyone have anything further with regard to this proposal?
I would just add, now that the maps are pulled up, and I believe you had this as a printout in your packet, Smyrna, I think it's either 3A or 2A is Smyrna Community Center, which of course has moved as an election day location for this year. But you can see at least the Smyrna 3A, Smyrna 2A is in between 3A and 1A. That is where the Smyrna Community Center is located. So it's just proximately located to the border of District 2 and District 1, or 3, excuse me. And you can see it is closer to our office than the other locations.
Does anyone have anything further with regard to the questions, for that matter, with regard to the proposed AIP locations for the June 18th runoff? That being the case, I will entertain a motion on the proposed AIP voting schedule and locations.
I move that we adopt the runoff AIP proposal with 3 locations, the Maine, the Kennesaw, and the East Cobb Government Center.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to adopt the proposed AIP in-person advance voting locations, the main office, Kennesaw location being at Ben Robertson Community Center, the east location being at East Cobb Government Center, June 10th through the 14th for the hours 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next up, do you have any additional matters
I do.
for us?
I do.
Good.
Before I jump into my regular report, I did want to note that we have Marcus Spivey, our new absentee division manager here, and as I mentioned earlier, Melissa Miller, our newly promoted registration division manager. So our two, and Michael, like I said, is out running pickups. Otherwise, you'd see all 4 division managers here at one time, which is kind of a miracle. That's why Michael's not here. So we're really happy to have those positions filled, and we're really excited to see what they're going to do, and to have the leadership team fully filled out is a really good feeling. And we have a lot of work ahead of us, and we're excited to jump into it. So I just wanted to note that before I jump in.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Yes, I will say ditto. I'll say more during the board report, and obviously my colleagues during board comment, but congratulations on your promotion and welcome.
So first up, I wanted to take a minute to talk about election day shift work. I know initially I had said that this is something we were going to pilot in May, but to be totally transparent, it just was not working. May was hard to staff due to graduation. We had a lot of our regular people that could not work because they had a child or grandchild graduating, or they were going to be out of town for a graduation. And the area supervisors just came to us and said, hey, this is not working. And so instead of just saying, oh, it didn't work, we wanted to put it aside and give it an opportunity to really try to make it happen, to see what we can do for June. So we will be working towards this for the June runoff. Because we have less precincts, we know we're going to have a lot more people able to work this election due to only having 69 out of 148 precincts. So it'll be a good opportunity for us. So we're targeting 4 precincts, 1 in each part of the county, so north, south, east, west. So we can see if maybe one area is more successful than the other, if that plays a factor at all. And we're looking at 2 sets of shift workers for each of those precincts. So that would be 2 people for AM and then 2 counterparts for PM. A big reason of why we decided to shift is trying to work through the payroll piece of this in such a large election was pretty daunting. And so we know that we can, again, accomplish this more successfully at a smaller election. I would like to note I have received a lot of pushback from the area supervisors. They see this as double the amount of work for them, double the amount of people to call, double the amount of people to sign up for training. We're reminding them that this is a pilot program, and we're going to see what happens and try to engage people that typically could not engage in being a poll worker. And so we're just reminding them that. But I did want to note that it has been a little bit more difficult to get the area supervisors on board than we had initially hoped. So, but we'll get there. We're going to try it for June, and we'll see what the results are and what those individuals' experiences are like. I wanted to also give a safety and security update. So as the board is aware, we had a security incident in our office on April 16th. I was out of town at a tabletop. Unfortunately, we had an individual in our office who's known to the community. He's known to be unwell. He's also unhoused. He came in requesting initially to get a voter ID. And then when he was engaged to be provided that service, he became irate and started threatening to kill the individuals in our lobby. One thing that was alarming is that it took my staff almost 15 minutes to call 911 from when this incident started. And talking with the staff in an office-wide meeting we've had since then, I think a lot of it, to be honest, is desensitization. I think my staff is used to being yelled at, and they're used to, members of the community coming in, whether they're known to be unwell or whether they're not. And it's just really a matter of remembering what an average person would consider threatening, and obviously someone threatening someone else's life is threatening, and they should have called 911 right away. It was additionally concerning that it took the Marietta PD almost 15 minutes to get to our office. In speaking with them, they have said that that was an issue with 911, that 911 called it in as just a regular disturbance call, which could be, or a threatening call, which could be someone sending a threatening text message or someone lurking around vehicles, and that it wasn't identified that it was an elections office, that it was our elections office, and that it was someone threatening to kill someone. And speaking with the individual who called 911, that is not what she's told the 911 operator. So now our address has been coded to be a Cobb County Elections Office. So hopefully there will be a heightened sense of urgency when dispatched, if, God forbid, something like this were to happen again. So with that, I'm working with CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. They're a division of Homeland Security that's tasked with assisting election offices with both physical security and cybersecurity to develop different products. So I provided a few drafts in your packets for you today. These are what CISA refers to as their last mile products. So we're looking at, and there's an additional one that is still, it was too rough of a draft for me to give you guys today, but these are just some election emergency response guides. So you'll note that there's one that's double-sided, that's a little bit more in detail. That would be likely for a polling place because it really focuses on what to do in the event of a severe weather, a fire alarm, a violent incident, or if they were to experience some type of cybersecurity incident. And then on the back side, it has numbers that will fill in. And then the other one is just a single-sided page that we'll have at everyone's desks. So once we have those numbers filled in, we'll have that. So every single employee has that readily available. So we'll include these for both our election day voting sites as well as our early voting sites. We'll have, and again, still working through the drafts with CISA on those, and that's a free of charge to our county to utilize those services. So we're really grateful for the work that CISA does. We'll be having an active shooter training this Friday, the 31st at our office at 10 a.m. And then I'm working with our public safety department to plan an election safety meeting at sometime in August with our county partners. So I'm not calling it a tabletop because I want it to be a little bit more realistic. But I will have the sheriff's department, police, the local city police, fire department, 911, EMA, comms team will be there. Our IS department will be there. And just sit down and say, okay, what are we gonna do if a polling place in unincorporated Cobb catches on fire? Okay, now what do we do if a polling place in the city of Smyrna catches on fire, right? Because those are two different units that respond to those incidents. And so trying to work through what that is like, I think, my predecessor had been here for a long time and she knew who to call if there was an incident. I don't, because I'm still new. So just getting everyone in the room together to talk through realistic, this is what could happen. Like, I don't know, there's a gas leak outside one of our precincts the night before Election Day, and now the road is gone. What are we gonna do, right? So we'll have DOT in there as well to help us kind of walk through that, which major shout out to DOT and EMA for helping us secure message boards to go outside of Murdoch 01, but we ended up not having to reroute traffic at all, and the road was fully open, I think, by 7:30 a.m., so there were no delays at all at that precinct. So just talking through these different scenarios with the relevant parties in the same room is something we're hoping to do in August when they're thinking about November. I'm already thinking about it, but I want to give them their summer to enjoy before we start talking November.
Thank you for these, and also thank you for letting us know about the incident when it occurred, and obviously you've done the diligence and the work to start putting some resources together, as well as thank you for letting us know about the issue out at the intersection on the eve of Election Day. I guess my question here, and I know that a number of questions have been raised with regard to the first incident, that being the voter in our office making threats. I know I inquired with you, hey, has Secretary of State been advised? Has GBI been advised? So as I look at this, and again, I'm looking at the single-sided one because that seems like it would be the one that would be appropriate since it's going to be the one at the desk. Had we had this in place, this is what would have been there at the receptionist's desk. I guess in this, I see the state contacts, and it's maybe just something to think about. I don't know that we need to work through it here, but the state contacts are there, but there's no indication as to when they will be called in the 3 items that are noted below. So
Right.
it's
Yeah,
just something to
I see in the
consider.
violent incident, they only have CCE, which is Cobb County Elections.
Right,
And
right.
then GMA. So we can definitely rework those numbers, the steps with CISA to edit them to more accurately reflect who we have. And I know that there's another one that actually probably would have been, it's the one that is still in draft. It's about a personal security incident. And that talks more in depth of what to do. And that does have the FBI, our local field office, right across the top on that one. And so that one I think is maybe even a little bit more relevant to the incident we had in our office.
Okay.
Like a personal security incident versus a violent incident. So as soon as I get that second draft back, I'll be sure to email that to y'all, and then we can work through maybe how to rework some of these steps.
Okay, and even that example, how does one define a violent incident versus a security
Absolutely.
incident?
Yeah, so that's something when we launch these with the team, we'll need to walk through and do a training on the training, I think, a training on the flyer.
Okay.
I might suggest that instead of using the term violent incident, that we use life-threatening. I mean, you list two things, a bomb threat and active shooter, which both of those, I'm assuming, are life-threatening. The active shooter could be considered violent, but a bomb is an object. So just a thought, and then have a additional category for personal threats.
Yeah.
Personal harm. In my opinion, a threat for personal harm versus name-calling are probably two different things.
Right, I think my staff would agree with that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
And I will note on the other document, Daniel was helping me, part of that document is defining the state by state law, what is a threat versus what is terroristic versus what is violent versus, so it breaks those different things out. And so I think that that'll probably be the basis of where we start, and then we can look at the terminology and make sure that all the documents are synced.
Yeah, I do think those things do need to be defined clearly so that some overzealous people might not be quite as overzealous, and some timid people might need to up the ante.
Parentheticals might be helpful. For example, whether it's violent incident, life-threatening, I know it says bomb threat, but, in parentheses, perhaps active shooter or some other example.
Absolutely.
Might be instructive for the team.
Thank you.
And I just had a couple things. I think on things like this, I think it's a great idea. I think it needs a revision date on the bottom so that people know what's the most current version, or so that, if it's from 2020
Right.
and you're in 2024, And I also would pay attention to the shading so that it's photocopiable, because I feel like not everybody's going to have access to a color printer all the time, but sometimes people might just take a copy and give it to a colleague. And on the front page of the election emergency response guide, most of these things,
The one-sided or
the
two-sided?
two-sided sheet,
Okay.
because all the phone numbers are on the back, there's one spot here where it says, when in doubt, call Cobb Elections. If you could get the phone number on that page.
Sure.
I think that might be helpful. Sometimes things, two-sided things, in emergency, somebody's not going to flip
I'll look at
over.
it. That's right.
So everybody knows 911, but if they have a question, I think the phone number's somewhere on this page. Those are just a few things that stand out to me off the bat looking at these.
Sure. Absolutely. Great. Almost there. I did do a review of the 2023 audit that was done by our county's internal audit team in 2023. And I did include a paper copy of that updated spreadsheet for y'all in your packets today, and I'm happy to email a digital version as well. I'd note that 30 out of 35 recommendations have been implemented, and that was not to do with me. That was prior to me coming here, and the team had implemented a lot of those suggestions and recommendations from the IA team. And then the remaining recommendations are really specific reporting mechanisms for the most part, and so those we'll be working on over the summer to ensure that they're implemented prior to starting to receive applications for November, which will begin mid-August. We're also finally have acquired USDR and Airtable, so we finally got that contract through legal, and I'm meeting with them, USDR, tomorrow to start building our ABM unit to help us better track applications as they're coming through, to move the chain of custody to a digital version instead of a paper copy that could be lost. So that's something that I think will help tremendously, as well as the next slide, which I'll talk about in a minute if you guys have any questions regarding the audit.
Not so much with regard to the audit, but to the extent that you raised the solution Airtable, you've gotten the contract in place, you're starting to work on that. Do you anticipate using Airtable to track ABM applications and ballots for the runoff?
No, we
No.
won't, it won't be built in time for the runoff.
Okay.
So unfortunately, but we will, I think, be able, since the runoff will be so much smaller, because we really only have a lot of the rollover applications. We received very few additional applications within the deadline, and only some of those rollovers are applicable, right? It's only people who'd previously identified a Democratic ballot. And so I think that using a smaller subset will be able to really get into the minutia of the different steps, so that way we know that the Airtable rollout will be a lot smoother than after a large election when things just kind of happen.
Sure. I was just trying to identify to the extent it was available, a smaller election to be your first election that you're using it, as opposed to November. So
I would suspect that we would do some type of mock election, a very small one. That way the team, because they'll need to be trained on it.
Sure.
So we can create fake applications and stay out of Jarvis and just have those paper applications and do that. We're looking at, as long as our summer calendar stays clear, a week-long training in August for the staff. I'm going to do an Olympics theme since it's an Olympics year. And so that's one of the big things that ABM will be training on is Airtable. So they'll need to physically be doing it. As adults, that's the only way we learn is by physically practicing. So that's something that ABM will be doing. And then we're also going to do a lot of cross-training during that week to allow other employees from other departments to come over and see what the other departments do. I had someone that we had a meeting over in ABM, and they said that was the first time they'd ever even been in the ABM room. So trying to break down those silos and do a lot of cross-training during that week, which will hopefully be fun as well.
right. So a mock election with test applications or test data
Yeah.
outside of any electronic system.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
I cringed when you said the word fake.
Yes, yes, mock. All right, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is a third-party vendor for absentee by mail. So for the November election, we'll be utilizing Fort Orange Press to mail our absentee by mail ballots. We won't be doing it in-house. This is just not because we need to, but because we can. It's one giant thing off the plate for ABM, so they can just focus on processing applications correctly and timely, and then the receiving piece of the mail once the ballots start coming back. So Fort Orange Press is who we use to print our emergency and provisional paper ballots currently. So we were able to just tack on to our existing contract with them instead of having to go through the RFP process, which would have taken months. I previously had used Fort Orange Press in my previous location. They're fantastic to work with. Our customer service rep is a former election director from Gwinnett, so she understands Georgia elections, especially in a metro county. And she's taught me a lot just in working with her to do our order for our emergency ballots. One thing that is great about Fort Orange that we don't currently have the capacity to do is we will get a daily spreadsheet of their mailouts. And we'll be able to confirm by the voter ID and their relating IMB, which is Intelligent Mail Barcode, that the ballots were mailed out. And then we'll be able to track those ballots and watch for delays. So this is a screenshot of a separate county that is currently using Fort Orange Press. Our customer service representative, Ms. Royston, sent this to me so I could show y'all a little bit about what that would look like. So as always with mail ballot tracking, it's only as good as USPS's scans. Once it leaves that in transit to voter, it's up to USPS to make those relating scans. So you can see we have the voter ID has been redacted. But then you have their to voter IMB, so their outgoing intelligent mail barcode, and then their returned intelligent mail barcode, their return IMB. You can see when the file was uploaded, that's when the county uploaded the file saying these are the ballots that need to go out. When they mailed them, which it is typical to have a 48-hour turnaround for that. And so you can see the mailing date when they were printed, and then when they were actually scanned as saying they were in transit to voters. So Fort Orange Press is located in upstate New York, but they drop their ballots directly at a processing facility, so it doesn't have to go somewhere else. So it'll go directly from their processing facility to be scanned for anthrax and other substances, and then dropped into the regular mail stream. And then you can see where USPS has done a great job of, for some of these voters, scanning that delivered to, whether that was through their informed delivery when it gets scanned to them or a physical scan. And then you can see that coming back ballot when it's in transit to the Board of Elections, and then when it was actually delivered with a delivered scan. So we'll get this report every single day, so we'll get to see what has been mailed out as well as where our other ballots are in the process. That if we notice, all these ballots that were mailed on this one day, they're not getting any movement, we may be safe to assume they're in a tray in Palmetto, like one of our fellow counties found in this previous election. So this is a piece of technology that we haven't had up until this point, and so we're looking forward to having this for the November mail out, which, looking at this year's, we haven't hit 1% turnout by ABM, but who's to say what's going to happen in November? So definitely would rather be safe than sorry, and be utilizing our resources as best as we can.
Okay.
And that's all I had.
Any questions for Tate with regard to any of the items that she's shared with us? Okay. So my report will be brief. First, I'd like to note that this board will hold a retreat, or we will have a retreat on August the 3rd, as I keep messing up the date. August the 3rd, I believe we've slated at either an 8:30 or a 9 a.m. start time. Okay. And as you all can see, there are a lot of administrative matters, and that the board and the office needs to basically confer about, to align on, and it's just important for the five of us to come together to have those conversations, put policies and procedures in place. In addition to that, there's some governing documents that have not been updated in quite some time, really, as I understand it, since this board came into existence in the 80s. And so when you consider all of the technological developments and everything else that has transpired in those 40-plus years, we're long overdue to update some of those documents. And so do you realize that the meeting will be open to the public? There will be an invitation for all of our divisional leadership to attend. We do anticipate it being an all-day event, but it's not our expectation that you all will be required to stay all day. Of course, you are welcome to stay with us all day, but I think, it'll be a good onboarding opportunity with the new members of the team as well, and with Tate. So I don't know whether anyone has any questions about that. I've obviously shared this with the balance of the board, have encouraged and I encourage everyone to provide topics so that we can get that agenda pulled together and out to everyone to make certain that the concerns and the things that are ideas that are being raised, we're raising them in a way that we can all collaborate on them, given the limitations that we have to meet. If there are more than two of us at a time, obviously that needs to be in a public setting. And a lot of the topics do require the input of everyone. And I believe, Daniel, you will be able, or someone from your office will be able to join us, because I think you indicated that you might have a conflict.
Yeah, my conflict would probably just be in the morning, so depending on what you guys end up doing, I could probably either join later, or I can have Bill come and fill in until then. And hopefully, to the extent we're going to be looking at things like bylaws, I'll have some drafts already, that we can, consider ahead of time. But yeah, if we want to reserve, stuff specifically on legal things, but yes, I'll either have Bill come fill in the morning until I can get there, or I'll
Yeah,
get there.
and we can, and that's why I want to have that conversation, so we can go ahead and pull together the agenda and those specific items that I believe require your input. We can defer those to the afternoon.
Sure.
Okay. Anyone have questions, comments, concerns about that? Go ahead.
I actually just have a comment. I would love to see us invite our legislators and have them attend at least a specific time slot. Who knows what might come of that? Since they write the laws, but half of them know nothing about elections, I think it'd be great if they'd actually show up.
Okay, that's a very fair point, and I will, we will make an effort, well, not, we will make an effort, we will definitely invite them. You know, there was some conversation about inviting local elected officials, and, you know, I defer obviously to the board as to whether we invite local elected officials. Obviously, it's a public meeting, so anyone is available to attend, but you do raise a very good point, because I don't believe, and I'll just be very transparent saying, I don't believe that a number of our state legislators have the fullest appreciation for the laws that they pass and the implications of those laws on the offices.
No, and I think if we had one portion dedicated to the legislators who write our laws, it would be good. Local people are a lot more involved. They can come if they want, but they don't write the laws.
Understood.
So, okay.
Have we picked a location?
Yes, Security Village, and unfortunately.
Safety Village.
Safety Village,
Yes.
just to let you know that I didn't make the meeting, and again, I apologize. If you will share what the Safety Village is and the location.
Sure. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Safety Village. If you had kids go through Cobb County Schools, you're probably very familiar with it. It's a really, really cool location off of County Services Road Boulevard, still learning Cobb directions. But it's that central location where we have a lot of our services over there. It's next to the Animal Services building. And it's a large facility where they do kindergarten, second, and fourth grade, I believe they said, come through and they learn about fire safety and police safety, and there's a little mini village there, so we'll be in the civic center of the Safety Village, which is just right inside the main entrance. It's a great location, very large, and so I think that it'll be a nice change of scenery, and it's pretty cool. I wanted to be back in second grade and be learning how to learn fire safety. So I think it'll be a lot of fun for us to kind of be out there and enjoy the scenery a little bit.
Great.
And thank you for raising that point. Last Friday, Tate had an opportunity to take a look at the facility, and again, I wasn't able to join her, and I apologize for that. So we're probably going to start 8:30, 9 a.m. It'll be an all-day affair from 8:30, 9 a.m. to about 3 or 4, depending upon the agenda. And so I encourage each of you all to share agenda items with myself and with Tate, so we can go ahead and formulate that agenda and get it out to everyone to make certain that the points of discussion that everyone wants to have on the agenda are included. Now, I also will note that there are likely to be some work sessions that come out of that. So I know that during my term on this board, we've not had work sessions, but if we're going to update the policies and procedures, some of which are being informed by updated laws, some are just being informed by, you know, being here, seeing the election, seeing some of the challenges and opportunities to codify processes and policies working alongside our new director. I think it's time for us to get that done. And as it relates to me, probably past time, given what I had hoped to accomplish by joining the board. The other item I wanted to bring to our attention, it is something that we discussed during our election night meeting, is the topic of challenges. There are a number of, quote, challenges that voter challenges that have been submitted to this board, and they've not been submitted under a specific code provision, shall I say. I'm referring to them as non-challenge challenges, in as much that the challengers or the individuals that are sharing them with us have not submitted them under a specific code provision. But we will be taking those up. I had actually anticipated the gentleman that submitted it, the most recent one, being here. I don't believe he's here, but to the extent that he's viewing, we will be taking those up. If you will, Daniel, I know during our election night meeting, we discussed some guidance and some, like a documented guide for us as well as for the office. Where are you and your team with pulling that together?
So I sent an email on Friday there was more of like a memo. And, it just kind of outlined the general considerations and some of the timing considerations. And I guess the next step is to sort of move that towards more like a bullet pointed type guide for each specific type. But, the reality is on these challenges, you really have to start clarifying with the voter, are they wanting to submit it as a challenge and process it like a challenge or not? Because if other than the four specific non-status or four specific status-related challenges, which is the deceased voters, convicted felons, mentally incompetent, and non-citizens, those have some specific guides around how the board gets the information from the state and how that's processed and how voters are removed or notified if they get notice. And so there's some specific things around that. But anything, that deals with allegations about address changes or residency and those kind of, basically residency-based challenges have to conform both under the NVRA and under the National Voter Registration Act and under the new challenge procedures. And so, to the extent someone is submitting, any citizen is submitting documents that they're just saying, well, we want you to consider removing these voters. If, basically the underlying opinion in the memo was that if they want to do that, they need to be willing to submit it as a challenge, because otherwise it really moves it back towards this board doing its own duty under 228. And in that case, you still have to notify the voters that are on the list, and the staff still has to do the work on the challenges, and you get to give them notice of 3 days advance. And so really, there's no such thing as people just saying, I want to submit this information for you, for your use in, voter removal. You're welcome to take in that information, but the minute you do, you're then sort of moving into the OCGA 21-2-228 mode of voter maintenance or challenging electors. So, and there's also some updates in that memo that talked about, now under 21-230, which is the challenges that comes prior to an election. You're not allowed to consider those until in the 45 days before an election or a runoff or a primary. So those have to be postponed. And so there's some of that's in the memo, but what I was mentioned in the emails that I can just try to, come up with a document for probably one that deals with how to deal with status-based challenges, or where the guidelines are about those and what the law says, or how staff should handle them and the board should handle them, and then similar for the residency-based challenges. But the reality is that we have to make sure people that are attempting, and I don't doubt that they have the best of intentions, that they want to, assist the registrars with keeping the rolls clean, and that's an admirable goal. But there's very specific procedures, and as pointed out in the memo, the National Voter Registration Act says that list maintenance, it's not how they say it, but there's a description for a broader term, that those things have to be done in a manner that's uniform and non-discriminatory. And so that's why we have rules in the Georgia Code about how to process these things, and rules about handling things as elector submitted voter challenges, and also challenges by the board, voter eligibility review by the board under 228. Those all have notice and due process requirements that sort of prevent non-uniform or discriminatory challenges. And there's just no way for this board to know when someone is submitting a list from outside, what were their criteria for gathering it. They can tell you what it is. They can tell you where they got it. We know the new subsection 230 says you cannot just use the national change of address. It specifically now says you can't just use NCOA, you have to have further proof. So, and I also cited you to some case law that talks about you have to have individualized rigor is allowed in the 90-day window if you're going to have these larger lists submitted. And so the harder thing is like you're going to have to sort of make the call on when someone submits a challenge, inside that 90-day period, and you have to make that distinction between what's a systematic challenge versus what's something that's more individualized. There's no case out there that says 100 is systematic, 50 is individualized. Like that, we just don't know, and it can really vary based on how close it is to the election, or how much time, or what information is submitted versus what needs to be verified. So I tried to lay some of that out in the memo Friday, but that's just really more of just the legal underpinnings, and I'll try to put something that's more bullet point, just the shorter version that you can consider sort of maybe at our next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Going back to a statement that you made at the beginning, as it relates to this board, and if I'm misstating it, parroting it back to you, definitely let me know. As it relates to this board making a decision in connection with the non-challenge challenges that are being submitted, I mean, in as much that they're not citing that they're being submitted under, section 229, 228, as you indicated, those are kind of the status, but, 229 residency for the most part. Can you go back to that? Because if there's something that this board needs to, some action this board needs to
Right.
take, given the pendency of the 2,600 votes, and what I'm saying, a decision that we need to make as to communicating back to that voter, I think we need to do it now.
Yeah, no. So the status-based, there's two things here. The status-based challenges, if someone submits something to you and it falls under one of those four categories, and really the only thing that you can really consider on your own, outside of the statutory, everything else is preempted when the three of the four categories are preempted. So the convicted felons, the incompetent persons, and the non-citizens, there's a process laid out that says the Secretary of State gathers this information, sends it to the counties, you send notice. Like those are all very clearly laid out, and that there's a process. The only one that says you can gather outside information is for deceased individuals, and that is people can submit obituaries, or family can send something to the board confirming it, or you can gather it on your own. And so that is an area where you can receive outside information, and those type of requests, so specifically deceased voters, if somebody submits that you get 60 days to respond and say, or we've considered your information and we find it either verifiable or not, and then we'll act on it. In terms of the residency challenges, I mean, those we need to let them know. Like either this citizen needs to know if you want to submit this as a challenge under one or the other code section, you need to do it. The board can look at it and consider and say, well, I think we ought to use this under 228, but that's your decision. If you say someone has submitted this kind of list and we want staff to follow up on it and gather the information, that can be done under 228, but that's discretionary. And it's weird because it says 228 says you have both a right and a duty to periodic from time to time. It says review the eligibility of voters. So you have that ability to do it, the right to do it, but there's no requirement. If someone just submits their own outside research on whether it's based on the national change of address or other sources, if they're making a residency challenge, you need to. My recommendation is just to confirm with the voters, like, are you submitting this as a challenge? And if not, we'll just decide as a board whether to take this up under 228.
Okay.
I thought we did respond to him and ask that, and noticed that he was outside the appropriate time frame. Am I dreaming?
We
Am I
did.
dreaming?
No, you
Okay, I
may be
think we
dreaming,
already-
but you're dreaming correctly. No, we did respond to him, but there's also a lot of email communication that has kind of gone back and forth, lots of conversations about it, and I just want us all to be clear. Because, at the time that was received, our office, and rightfully so, we were actually in the middle of AIP, focused on the election.
I
So
think he
wanting to be
can-
certain
yeah, I
that Tate and her team have the appropriate guidance. And also, I think and please jump in here if y'all think I'm incorrect, in as much that when these come in, It's less, in that particular instance, we were within that NVRA period, but in an instance when we're not, it sounds as though the guidance that Mr. White has given us is that our response to any person that submits this challenge that says, I'm not submitting this under section 229, or I'm submitting this as kind of a non-challenge challenge. No, actually, you need to submit it as a challenge, and we will take it up as such. Am I correct in, that's what you've said, or no?
Well, you really have two options. You just say, look, if you definitely want this considered as on the basis that you're submitting it, you need to submit it as a challenge, because, you know, the issue you have is if you have unverified material being submitted to you as a challenge, you've got to, if you take that on, then now it becomes your responsibility under 228 to say, okay, we have this information, now we have to go run it down, verify it, and then give notice. And so the burden shifts to this board once you accept somebody else's list maintenance, you know, information and say, well, okay, we're going to use this, and go, well, now if you have to call these, and you do, you have to provide 3 days notice to any voters that you're removing, and if they come in, it's the burden, this board's burden. You're now taking someone else's information that they submitted and saying, we're going to use this as the basis for list maintenance, and so whatever they've sent plus whatever staff pulls, that's what you would need to use under 228.
Right.
So whereas it's more appropriate if a voter feels that strongly about what they're submitting, then they need to say, yeah, I'm willing to stand by this and under 229 or 230, and then the burden is on the voter to do that. So that's not to say that you can, and you should, and there are times when you know, information is submitted, and I also want to say there are processes already in place through the Secretary of State's office and through the statute that are going on daily at the office, to both for the status, the 4 status categories that we talked about with felons and incompetent, like that's just happening every month, whether folks know it or not. And are there going to be occasions where there's some people fall through the cracks, like there's a count of somebody who's convicted in another county and his last address happens to be here, and the notice like that may happen. And so there are times when you may, you know, there may be somebody that's not, you know, 100% on there, but you would also hope that it, you know, some of the federally and state required inactive voter stuff is going to catch people after a couple of election cycles. I know people don't like how long that takes, but it takes that long because that's what the federal statute says it has to do. It has to take 2 cycles. And so again, the board has the ability, and in the past has, you know, collected obituaries and done things like that, and compared them to voter lists. And so that's an option. But if we are having voters submit, particularly when it's like a couple thousand you know, we're looking at 2,500 voters, and we want you to do this, and we're 2 months out from election, that's a big burden on the staff to, in the middle of preparing for an election and advance voting, to, you know, let's pull some staff off and go research all of these submissions. And this voter doesn't want to submit it as a challenge because he doesn't want to take the time to come in and defend it, but we want staff to take that on under 228. So that's what I was going to say. It's usually probably the better policy to say, listen, citizen, you have the right to submit this stuff, and we would ask you to bring it as a challenge if you want to do it. But if it's something the board gets information about and says, well, I would like to follow up on that, that's up to the board if you want to take that up under 228 and take on the burden of researching and notifying all the voters that are on the list.
Thank you, and that's why I raised it, because I don't know that it's my decision to say, hey, we're not going to take this up under 228. If you're going to submit it as a challenge, you need to submit it as 229. I believe that is a decision to be made by this board. So, go ahead, Ms. Fisher.
I believe he is planning on coming back, and I sent him, which he already had, the law on 229
Yeah, he
and
definitely has
230.
it. He submitted
And
many under 229.
Yeah. And I don't believe there's a restriction in either one of those on the number of voters that can be submitted. But I believe he's planning on doing that. But I also want to make distinction between his felon challenge, which wasn't a challenge, and his residency.
And I was speaking strictly residency, that's why I
Okay.
made reference to 229 and not 228.
Yeah.
But yes, the 2600 is residency. I'm looking at it now. So
Correct.
that, yeah, I'm focused on that.
I think after the email exchange with Mr. Williams, I think he did send me a text and said he was planning on refiling.
Okay, well, thank you for
So-
sharing with us, because the
Don't
balance of the
hold
board
me
wasn't
to
aware.
it, because he said, I'm planning on it, so it's not official, but there's a big distinction
There is.
between the two, yeah.
Yeah, there is a distinction, and
And
that's why I
and
wanted
our
to raise it.
obligation.
Exactly, and I want to be really clear about our obligation as it relates to whether it's 20 or whether it's 2,000, or whether
Yeah.
it's 20,000. To the extent that the challenge is not submitted to us with respect to residency under 229, I don't believe it's appropriate for us to determine that it should be reviewed under 228 and then shift that burden, as Mr. White just described, to our staff. And that's what I wanted to bring up in this format. So,
No, but I do want to comment, because if I remember his spreadsheet, and I didn't study it, the vast majority of them were not declared inactive. And if they truly have moved and they aren't inactive, that should be looked at. The inactive eventually will catch up and end up on the NGE list. If they're still active but they've moved, that's a different story.
yeah. And I'm not passing at this point, and bringing this up is not a matter of discussing the merits of the data. I just want us to be clear on process, and I did not want to make that determination with respect to process without conferring with the balance of the board, or for that matter, hearing from our attorney.
Well, Daniel brought up the inactive status, so that
Okay.
is part of the process. But I don't think these were inactive. There were a few, but the vast majority weren't.
Right, and then that
So
inactive.
we need to address that portion in our process as well.
Right, and I think, Mr. White, if I'm correct, you brought up inactive status as it relates to the standard process that's undertaken every 2 years, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So are we in agreement with regard to any types of challenges that are asserted based upon residency that does not reference 229, even if they do not bring it to us? We are going to provide guidance to the office, because they are generally not submitted to us, or sometimes we're copied on it, but they're directed to Director Fall, that the appropriate response would be to that person is that they need to submit it as a challenge. There's no such thing as a non-challenge challenge as it relates to residency. Are we all in agreement with that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool. That is it with regard to my update. Mr. White, is there a need for executive session?
Not at this point. I did want to mention, and I'll forward it to you, there was a motion to reconsider filed in the Flom case. But as again, I don't think this is going into legal advice, but I will just say anecdotally, I can think of one time when an appellate court has ever actually reconsidered, and they didn't change their opinion. They just dropped a new footnote in their opinion. So that has been filed, and I want the board to know that that's been filed, but and I'll forward it to you.
Okay.
But
The filing party, I presume, is the county?
Yeah, no, Flom.
Flom, okay.
The Floms have asked the Supreme Court to reconsider
I understand, okay.
their opinion in that case.
Okay, got it. Next, oh, go ahead, sir.
I think I would like to have an executive session to discuss the filings on the Adams case that Daniel sent out
Oh, sure.
last week, that now that we've had a chance to read them,
Sure.
I think there's some significant questions to
Raise,
consider.
absolutely. Why don't we do this for the benefit of those that are present with us and those that are online? Does anyone have board member comments, and then we'll come back to executive session such that it is the last item? Yes.
I'm sorry, I have one more thing that I forgot to mention earlier. I
What's
apologize. In regard to the post-election records retention that we emailed about this morning. So the 4-page document that was shared, you'll note that One of those is the post-election records retention that goes to the Board of Registrars. One is to the election superintendent, which in this county, those are one and of the same. One goes to the Secretary of State's office, and one goes to the Clerk of Superior Court. And speaking with the staff before coming here, it's my understanding that those records are not given to the board in physical copy, but all of these are held in our office for records. So just as the much longer sheet of what's given to the election superintendent, these checklists are all put on boxes that are numbered, and they're marked as received, and we check off every single one. And then once the evidence is completed, then we put it into our own record storage with the ballots, and they're held there for the retention period. So that's how this has always been done, is that it's not that you receive copies, because they have to be in evidence. They're not just open things you can have. They have to be sealed and held for retention.
Okay. And thank you for that, because I did note it in the email, asking you to be prepared to speak to our process.
Yeah, I apologize
could not
for forgetting.
imagine that for years, if there was something that was due to this board, that it was just not being provided.
I don't think Ms. Evler would have done that.
Yeah.
I would like, and I don't need a hard copy, a digital copy of that list, just so I can review it, learn from it, if it,
Of the
other
physical
than the
evidence?
ones that say sealed, because obviously, yeah.
I will have to check in with the Secretary of State's office, because this is kind of a little bit out of my purview. Typically, the staff handles the evidence. So I'll need to check in with them to see what the
Even
what the
though it
practice
says it
is.
goes to the Board of Registrars?
I think even when we receive and gather this evidence, it's not in my office for me to look at any time. It's put into a box that's sealed for retention in the event of a lawsuit. It's not something that we just have, like it has to be open records requested. It's not something that's just available for the public to access.
Okay.
So I'll have to double check. I'm not a lawyer. I leave the lawyering to Mr. White, but I need to check in with the Secretary of State to see what the common practice is, because I did find a training from October of last year about evidence, and that is not mentioned in terms of giving the board a digital or a physical copy of the evidence.
And those items are clearly delineated in that training as evidence.
Correct,
Okay.
yes. There's separate slides on each
Well,
checklist.
to Jennifer's earlier point, there's never a date on the Secretary of State's document, so
I was curious.
it could be a totally different era between that document and the training, but I would like a response.
Sure, I'll get with Blake and try to
There's some
get a
worthy
response.
documents in there that I think are important.
Okay. I'll get with Blake and see what I can
And I
find.
just also should point out that, particularly for the documents that say that go to the Superior Court, those are documents that are typically held under seal by statute, and there may be other statutes that govern some of these other documents. And it just, out of transparency, those don't actually go to the Superior Court and back in the day they did, but they are still technically, they're assigned to the custody of the Superior Court, and then we hold them so that, frankly, it's safer to hold them in one location than say, let's transfer them all over to the Superior Court, and then if we need to pull them, we need to go get them and get specific. So they're still, if somebody wanted to unseal the ones that are by statute held by the Superior Court clerk, they still need to get a court order from the Superior Court to unseal them, because the Superior Court has custody of them, even though their physical location is still in storage. So that's, and there's always people who, well, these are supposed to be at the Superior Court. Well, they are under seal by law with the Superior Court, but honestly, for the actual physical safety of the documents and keep them protected, it's better to just keep them one spot instead of moving them back and forth. And so we're always transparent about that.
So noting that we want to kick executive session to after board member comments, does anyone have any comments? No? Okay. Ms.
Other than welcoming our new managers, I know that November is going to be a whole lot better because you all are here. Thank you.
I likewise welcome you. I look forward to working alongside of you. And again, congratulations on your promotion. I know large sighs of relief are being released with regard to your being on the team. And so we look forward to working alongside of each of you and learning from you. So, okay. Well, with that, I will entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to move into executive session. All those in favor? Okay. For those of you that are not generally with us, when we move into executive session, everyone must leave the BOC room, and at the conclusion of executive session, we will invite you back in. Go, go, go.
Okay.
I will entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to come out of executive session. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. And we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting, but I will have a note that our next meeting is the June 18th meeting, the election night meeting. Okay, thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.